My next leather project, I'm going to make a case for this little cell phone I've got. And it's going to be a belt mounted case, kind of like the knife cases I've made. So the front of it, I'm going to take this piece of leather and cut out a piece and mold it around it like I've done before. So it's going to end at about the top of this cell phone. So I'm just going to cut a piece of leather here that's approximately the right size. And then I'll wet it and we'll go from there. Okay, the next step is to keep the cell phone from getting ruined with water, so I'm going to put some cling wrap on it. Okay, the next thing is to get this leather wet to mold it, and I'm going to staple it down like I've done in the past. So let me get this wet in some lukewarm water and I'll come back. Okay, I've got this leather wet. So I'm going to start to mold it around this cell phone. I've added a little extra of this cling wrap because the leather might shrink a little bit. And I'm going to staple this down on the wood like I've done in the past. And then mold it around here. So let's get started. I'm keeping the staples out toward the edge so that they don't interfere with the design, because they're going to get cut off later and they will stain the leather. And as I mold around the bottom here, I'm going to have to cut a little bit so that it doesn't wrinkle. It can actually mold to the shape. I'm trying to keep these cuts out far enough that they'll get cut off once this is all molded and dried. Okay, the next thing to do is to start shaping this leather. It's pretty much molded to the shape, but I want to get a nice fit. And I just found that this this butter knife I have has some nice smooth round edges that help conform the leather to the shape of the project that I'm working on. Okay, I'll shape this a little bit more and then come back. While I was off camera, I reshaped this some more and folded the leather in a little more and kept restapling it, pulling staples up and restapling it until I got it the way I want it. And it's pretty much, square at the bottom, tucked in. So now all I have to do is let this dry. And I think I'm just going to put a fan on it to help it dry faster. I've done these in the oven before to help it dry faster. If you're in a hurry, that's okay. Just letting it dry is probably the best. So anyway, it's pretty much shaped the way I want it. I'll end up having to trim the top once it's all dry, and then I'll trim it to size once it's dry and then create the rest of it. While the front part of the case is drying, I decided to go ahead and make the belt loop that's going to be sewn on the back. So I'm going to cut some angles at the bottom here, which I've already marked. And that'll decide how big it's going to be as far as length. I've used this piece of aluminum in the past to make my belt loops with, which is about an inch and a half across. I'd like to make it just slightly wider than this, so I'm going to see if I can find something to space it out a little bit wider so I can mold around it. On second thought, I think I'll just make it this width like the other ones. Before I mold it to the shape though, I'm going to go ahead and put a border on it with this grooving tool. Okay, I've got a little groove all the way around now. Next thing to do is to get this wet and mold it to shape. I've gotten this wet And I'm going to mold it around this piece of metal now. I'll cut this to length after it dries. You can kind of get an idea of the shape. Front of the case has had a chance to dry, and before I take it off of here, I'm going to mark around the edge where I'm going to cut it. And there's the belt loop. It's 85% dry. So I'm going to use this pair of dividers and just mark a line. And I can remove these staples. I've also marked a line across the top here where I'm going to cut because it's not exactly straight, so I'll straighten that out in a little bit. Now all I have to do is follow that line I just created with the dividers with this knife. Okay, there it is.